Good evening. Do you support one of the Edinburgh clubs? Would you like to hear people discuss Hearts versus Rangers without spending our time almost exclusively discussing the losing side and where they went wrong? Would you like to hear someone acknowledge that there was a game that finished 6-3 and it's at least worthy of discussion on the radio? Then you've come to the right place. This is Radio Saltire and this is Monday Night Football. Guys, thank you for joining me in the studio.
Hello.
Let's get straight on with it with an opening question. Without talking too much about the game that happened at the weekend there so far, because we will cover that in detail later, it could be fairly judged as a rather ill-tempered affair.
Rami.
So what I would like to know is another game that sticks in your mind that your club was involved in that could be judged as rather ill-tempered. Scott, have you got one?
Yeah, and I've kind of had to go on YouTube highlights that I've saw. Thankfully someone's posted them up over the last year, and it's actually the Hibs Hearts game after the attempted buyout from Wallace Mercer in 1990.
Yes.
Some of the tackles, I mean, Gordon Hunter could have been sent off about 5 times over in that game. You could tell that he was clearly a passionate Hibs boy at heart when he was on the pitch that day, and that's definitely one just for the first half alone. There was obviously passions were running high on and off the park.
Yes, indeed. That's the game where allegedly Hearts were told by the police at half-time, don't score any more goals because if you do, this does not end well.
Yes.
Ross, what have you got, mate?
Well, I struggle to think of a specific Hearts game, but I'll go for a specific incident. A game that I was actually at. It was a Scotland game, and it was against San Marino in 2001. I think we all remember Colin Hendry's forearm smash / elbow, which basically knocked the guy out, and everyone was over thinking he swallowed his tongue. It was one of the worst things I'd ever seen on a football pitch. It was just absolutely, animalistic. It was not nice to see, especially in the flesh, because the guy was out for a long time. And he obviously got 6. I think it was a 6-match ban after it. If I'm right,
it was lengthy. Yes.
It was quite lengthy. So so not specifically to Hearts, but for that incident alone, that was horrible.
Was that before or after Rangers spent about £4 million on 34-year-old Colin
That was
Hendry?
after.
Was it after? Was he already a Rangers player?
Yeah.
Well, there you could see the influence coming through already. Mikey, what are your thoughts on a game that sticks in your mind?
Well, on my Monday Night Football debut, I touched on a match that was relatively tough. Hibs against Rangers, Graham Souness's debut.
Yes.
Where before the match he requested one of the Rangers players informed them who the Hibs hard man was, targeted him. But I wasn't at that match. The one I've seen in the flesh would probably must have been maybe 7-8 years ago now. Hibs against Falkirk at Easter Road. John Hughes was manager at the time, I think, and they were getting a lot of praise for playing some beautiful silky football, having come up for the first division, and it was absolutely appalling. Scott Brown and Kevin Thompson, who I must admit are not exactly shrinking violets, but they got leathered about the park all day long. There wasn't a footballer in the park playing for Falkirk. They were animals. Kevin Thompson got sent off after the match for probably grating his eyes out quite so much. But I've never seen a team genuinely go for it quite so much like that, and especially it went so against the grain of their style of football. And even I will add in the other week as well, Ireland against Scotland. Irish were an absolute gang. They were a gang.
Okay, well, before we get too controversial, that's a good range of options given there, guys, and feel free to get in touch with us to remind us of any that we've forgot there. Get in touch at MN Football on Twitter or facebook.com/Monday Night Football. Right now we're going to bring in our first guest of the evening. Barry Anderson, are you there?
I am, how are you?
Very well, thank you very much for joining us, Barry.
No problem.
Before we move on to the game at the weekend, is there a game that sticks in your mind, maybe that you had to cover and get an article out of that was particularly ill-tempered and difficult to be fair about?
Probably not one that I've covered, or certainly not one that I've covered. The one that always sticks in my mind was the Rangers Hearts game round about 19, I think it was, Hearts with 4 men sent off.
Yes.
At Ibrox. Just always sticks. I don't even think it was a particular game, to be honest, but the referee seemed to lose control quite a bit that day, and 4 Hearts players went off. I seem to remember Chris Robinson appearing on the track, and I think he was trying to call the Hearts players off the park at one point.
There was definitely a discussion of that. Yeah, we had Paul Ritchie on a few weeks ago, and he let us into his thinking on that day and his possibly ill-judged comments that were made towards the stand-side linesman. But needless to say, doesn't really regret them the way that day went. So on to the weekend's game then, Barry.
Yeah.
You obviously come at a different perspective to these, especially the big games, than us as supporters. We're all, nervous, and that, as you hear in the stands all the time, that affects the way we all view the game. You have to take yourself out of that atmosphere and, watch the game from at least a fairly neutral perspective. From that perspective, how did you see the game on Saturday?
I thought it was a pretty even split, if I'm being honest. The first half was, for me, controlled by Rangers pretty much. They were up in Hearts. They were pressing them really high up the park, and Hearts couldn't get forward well at all. They couldn't get Jason Holt and Jamie Walker and Billy King into the game, and really seemed to struggle even after the red card. They were struggling a little bit just to get a foothold on it and get the ball moving around. And then the second half, obviously the goal came reasonably early in the second half, and that seemed to settle them quite a lot. And they went from strength to strength there. I think Rangers tired a bit, but Hearts moved the ball far better than Rangers did throughout that game. And even when Rangers were on top, their approach to the game seemed to be get the ball forward quickly and quite often towards John Daly up front. I felt Hearts played the better football and in that sense would deserve the result.
So what were the reactions like afterwards, Barry, in terms of your experience, obviously, interacting with some of the players involved and the managers? Was Robbie Neilson a same calm old self, and was Ali McCoist particularly despondent afterwards?
Yeah, well, you notice about Robbie, he's always very calm. He never seems to, never seems to lose his cool, lose his composure. I think the only time I've seen him do that this season was when Alan Ostrup scored at Easter Road, and you saw the footage back afterwards, and I think he was choking a couple of his backroom staff to death at one point. Robbie just tends to have that demeanour about him. He's just very, very collected, and nothing seems to fluster him. Ali McCoist, I thought, was pretty dignified after the game. John Daly less so, but Ali McCoist was very, very calm, very measured in what he said. Very honest in what he said, I thought. Obviously they came out and quite a go at Stephen Smith for his red card and hinted that he wasn't happy with one or two others, admitted that he took Kenny Miller off because of the tackle that he put in on Kevin McHattie, and the fact he'd already had a yellow card and would possibly give the referee a decision to make later on in the game. So, yeah, I felt both managers were very honest and very open. Daly's comments leave a wee bit of a bitter taste in the Hearts fans' mouth, and I can understand that, to be honest, because you can complain that some players will go over quickly or make a meal of a challenge, but that happens in every game, and it happens on both sides, every game of the week, every week of the season. And to point that out in the aftermath of a game in which Rangers have kind of really gone for Hearts' throats at times and in 2 or 3 really, really poor challenges, I thought that was a bit much.
That's very interesting to hear. To pause slightly on Saturday's game, Robbie Neilson's calm demeanour that you touched on there, I think ourselves as Hearts fans in the studio, we love that. It's nice to have that real, calm involvement with the club now after what have been a chaotic couple of years. It's nice to have someone who seems like they are able to keep things in perspective. From a journalistic perspective, how difficult is it to turn that into interesting and exciting copy when he seems to pride himself on being fairly monotone and taking everything in his stride? Is it a challenge to you?
Sometimes it's a challenge to hear him, yes, because he tends to whisper some of what he says. He's very quietly spoken, Robbie.
Do you think he does that on purpose?
I don't know, maybe he does. Even when I'm on the phone to him, he's very quiet, and you're sometimes straining just to hear what he's saying. But no, I mean, I think I can understand from a supporter's perspective, guys like yourselves, that you want someone in the technical area that is in control and composed of himself, and control his own emotions, and because that then obviously resonates with the entire team. From our perspective, sometimes it's good to have people who will go off on a rant and let it rip. I mean, that certainly gets headlined in papers, but sometimes the quotes that a manager will come out with are just as interesting, no matter how they're delivered. It's what they say that matters, and obviously the questions that you ask them. most of them are nowadays are experienced guys. They've all played the game for years before they go into management, so they're very media savvy, and Robbie certainly comes in that category. But if they have a message that they want to get out there, then and they're not frightened to put it out there, they're not frightened to give an opinion. Robbie does have his opinions, but he knows where to draw the line. There's certain opinions that he's not going to voice in public because he knows it's more trouble than it's worth, and that is, to be honest, just a sign of a manager who knows what he's doing.
How challenging is it from your perspective, Barry, as a journalist who has a distinct patch and covers, you cover Hearts on a regular basis? How challenging or difficult is it to manage the relationships of the your interviewees when you also have to be honest and potentially in some situations critical of them in your articles? Has that ever been brought up to you? Have you ever found it difficult to deal with certain individuals because they've taken issue with something that you've said about them or the way you've covered something?
You'll always get people that'll complain about something that you've written. It doesn't happen often, so it doesn't happen often to me, but it does happen from time to time, and you simply have to make sure anything that you're writing is written in a balanced fashion and it's written in an honest and truthful fashion, and that if you do get asked about it, then you have your side of the argument and you're able to put that across to them. They might not agree with you and you might not agree with them in their viewpoint, but I think if you put your argument across, generally I've always found that if you're able to put your argument across and back up your story or back up whatever comment you've made in the newspaper with a genuine, well-informed opinion, then people will accept that. Again, they might not totally agree with what you said, but if they understand that you've got your viewpoint and you're willing to stick to it, then there's generally not a problem, not a long-term problem anyway. I don't go falling out with people, and no journalist does go about his business start falling out with folks. So yeah, it's just a matter of being honest and being realistic about what you're writing about and the comments you're making.
While we're on the subject then of genuine, well-informed opinions, Vladimir Romanov, how much have your dealings with the club changed since the regime has changed? Have they been affected at all? And do you have any particular stories or experiences of the weird and wonderful Hearts under Vladimir Romanov?
Yeah, there's a few stories, right enough. Things have certainly changed for the better. I think everybody connected with Hearts would agree that the club now is in a far better position than it was when Romanov was in charge. That's fairly obvious. From our point of view, from the point of view, the public relations department at Hearts has been much better, much more open, much more forthcoming. I think there seemed to be anyway a mentality there at the time when Romanov was in charge, and certainly towards the end, where they were always cautious what they could say. Managers were always cautious what they could say. They were always cautious what they could tell the media, because I think a lot of the time the people in charge of the club didn't want relationships with the media. They didn't want information being given out. A lot of it was to be done sort of in private, if you like, in secret, and that doesn't really wash in this country. You can get away with that in Eastern Europe, but not over here. So that created obvious problems for media, that they were just trying to work on the club, and cover games, cover stories, and couldn't do it always. And certainly when all the financial stuff was going on in the background, and you're trying to get information on that and get details on that, and it becomes, it just magnifies the problem, really. So yeah, to go on the experiences, personally, I can only speak for myself. And how I dealt with Romanov, he was always a gentleman with me. He always had time, and pre-season tours and European trips. If you would bump into him, he always came across, shook my hand, and would try and speak. I mean, he did speak English, although it wasn't brilliant. But if he had someone with him who spoke better English, converse through them. The trip to Liverpool a couple of years ago in the European qualifying game. Afterwards, I managed to actually get in a taxi with Romanov on the way back to the Hearts team hotel, and did an interview with him in the taxi. And on the way through the streets. One of the more unreal locations for an interview that I've had. But,
was he raging that we had failed to win?
Disappointed. I think everybody was disappointed the way that game had ended, perhaps.
Was he considering a transfer bid for Suarez at that point as well?
No, I don't think so. I don't know if
realism had finally set in then.
Yeah, I think the financial situation at the club, that might have been a wee bit beyond them.
Did you get any on that taxi journey? Obviously, we remember that trip, a lot of us, because just as we were getting ready to head back from Liverpool, we heard the news that Ryan McGowan and David Templeton were about to be sold, and things went rather pear-shaped pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Did he give any inclination that deals like that were about to happen when you spoke to him on the Thursday night?
Yeah, he said in the taxi that basically on the record he was as open as Romanov probably ever is. When I asked him about Templeton, and he said if he wants to go, he can go. If he doesn't want to stay at Hearts, then he can go, and as long as the price is right. So yeah, it was fairly obvious at that point that they were going to sell him, and he'd be away the following day. Because if memory serves me right, that was the last day of the transfer window. The following day.
Yes, it was indeed.
Had to be done. That it wasn't a surprise to anyone. We knew that there was Rangers' interest at that time. It was just a matter of getting the deal done and signed off.
That's certainly interesting to hear, because I think that one particular deal has been shrouded in secrecy, really, because of how quickly it came about, and there was never really any time for us to find out any huge amount of information on it. On that subject, though, the discussion of sources comes up a lot amongst fans, and they speculate in terms of, that's just been made up, and that's, come from nowhere, or come from fans' forums, for example. Obviously, that's not the case, or there at least has to be some amount of corroboration to sources. How do you go about establishing what's a valid source, what isn't, and do they normally come from actually within the club?
It probably varies for different journalists have different sources. It's generally people that you know within, in a football context, if you're a sporting context, if you're a sports journalist, and it's people that you know within the sport. If you're a political journalist, it's people you know within politics and so on. It's just a case of building up relationships with people and showing them it's not something that can be done quickly. You don't build up a relationship with somebody inside a month and all of a sudden you can go and check things out with them. It's just people that you've known generally over a good number of years, that if a story comes up or you hear a particular rumour, then you can go to them and say, look, I've heard this is true, is it true? And then they can steer you one way or the other. It's all really built on trust, because you hear a lot of stuff in this business that you can't print and you can't write about and you can't repeat, and it's about knowing when to print the stuff and being clear with any particular source when you print the stuff so that they're comfortable with it, and there's nothing that's catching anyone by surprise.
Okay, final couple of questions then, Barry. In your position as a journalist who is employed to focus specifically on Edinburgh football and in particular Hearts, do you encounter the rest of the media, especially the national media, from the same perspective as ourselves in terms of the bias that some fans believe exists, particularly towards the West Coast? Do you feel, it may actually benefit yourselves, that you are then the voice of Edinburgh football to a certain extent, as we hope to be on the radio side of things, but do you think that the Edinburgh clubs do get enough coverage on a national sense?
It's certainly at the moment an unfair comparison to make, because they're both out of the top flight.
Yeah.
So you couldn't really say that they should deserve the same coverage. It should always, in my mind anyway, should always be the Premier League first, the Premiership first. It definitely benefits the Edinburgh Evening News. I know that for a fact, that if people want to read about the Hearts and Hibs, then that's the first place that they're going to come.
Yeah.
And if the other newspapers are focusing more on whichever team might be doing well, whether it's Celtic or Dundee United or Aberdeen when they won a trophy last year, then our readers know that constantly they will get Hearts and Hibs coverage every day, up to date coverage every day. So it does benefit us in that sense. Yeah, I can understand if you're a national newspaper, then you have to report on the big teams. You have to report on the big issues and whether they're taking place in Glasgow, Dundee, Edinburgh, wherever. When you go and you cover them, the difficulty we have in this country is that Rangers and Celtic are obviously, in terms of fan base, are a fair bit bigger than everybody else. So a fair portion of any national newspaper's readership is going to come from them. I would like to see a little bit more of the other clubs, not just in Edinburgh, but across the country, because there's some good football players and there's some good stories, interesting stories in these other clubs. And I'm not just talking Premiership clubs, I'm talking Championship and League One and beyond. I sometimes think that as a country in Scotland we can be very parochial. I'm not just talking about in the west of Scotland. I come from the west of Scotland myself, but I find it can be a nationwide. Sometimes we're very parochial and we don't like going out with our own bounds. If you're a Glasgow-based football fan and you'll read about Rangers and Celtic, you're not too interested in the others. If you're Edinburgh-based, a lot of people will read about Hearts and Hibs, they're not too interested in the others. And if you're in Dundee, Aberdeen, I find Scotland as a country can be like that generally.
Okay, very interesting to hear your thoughts on that, Barry. Final question for you. We can't let you go without getting your professional opinion on the season ahead. What are your predictions for Hearts and Hibs, if you want to give us that as well, in terms of where they will finish this season?
Well, I'll start with Hibs first. They've certainly picked up in recent weeks. I said right from day one, any conversations I had with people over the summer, that Alan Stubbs would be a good manager for Hibs, and I stick by that 100%. It's going to take time, obviously, to get the playing staff into shape there the way that he wants it, but I think gradually you begin to see that he's influencing things there. He's a very good coach. I know from people down south at Everton that he's very highly rated. He's got some very good methods and he's very well connected down there as well, which should work out to Hibs' advantage in the long run. So I think they should be more than comfortable in terms of getting a playoff place this year. I don't see any issue with that. I think the signing him Alonga was obviously done maybe slightly in haste after the injury to Farid El Alagui, but you have to say it's been a very well informed signing as well, because the goals that he scored, I think it's 9 now in 11 games, has been phenomenal, and it's been a real shot in the arm for Hibs to get a player like that in and have him scoring goals like that, and they will miss him if he goes away on African Nations Cup duty in the new year. Where Hearts are concerned, they've built up this advantage, and I think John Daly's words at the weekend were pretty much nail on the head. It is their league to throw away now. That's not to say that they've got it all sewn up and they can just take the foot off the pedal, but let's be honest, if they keep going at the same rate that they have been, picking up the same points at the same rate that they have been and scoring the goals that they have been, then they do look like the team that's going to win the league. The football that they've played up until probably a month ago, they were playing football that no one else could really touch them. The standards since then haven't been quite the same. They've struggled in a couple of games, and probably none more so than at Easter Road. They didn't play well that day at all, but they've managed to stay unbeaten, and that's, keep saying it's a sign of decent. If you're not playing well, you're still managing to carve out results, then you've got something going for you and you've got a real chance at the end of the day. I think where Rangers are concerned, the off-the-field stuff is having an effect and will continue to have an effect until it's settled. It'll be settled, we don't know. And that does seem to be hindering their hopes anyway of trying to mount a serious challenge to Hearts, because at the moment, towards the end of November, a 9-point gap, not insurmountable, but it's a fair mountain to try and climb. Alan McCoist admitted as much at the weekend after the game.
Okay, perfect. Barry Anderson of the Edinburgh Evening News, thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it, and we hope to speak to you again to you soon.
No problem. Thanks for the chat, guys.
No problem. Thanks very much, Barry. Cheers. Well, stay tuned on Monday Night Football. We will have another special guest for you, Scott Wilson, the voice of Hearts. Stay tuned. Thank you for staying with us on Monday Night Football on Radio Saltaire. We are back with our second guest of the evening, Scott Wilson. Are you there?
How's it going?
It's going very well. How's it going for you?
Very good indeed, very good, especially after Saturday, as you can imagine.
I have to say, I feel rather inadequate now with the voice of Hearts on the telephone. Even through the grainy line, your voice comes through loud and clear. It's that true radio spirit in you, Scott.
Get away with you.
So we are going to, essentially, we're going to have you as a Jambo in the conversation here, so we can talk about Saturday, because we would like to get your thoughts as a fan who watches the game like all of us. In general, what were your thoughts on Saturday's game?
I thought, well, a fantastic result, obviously, at the end of the day. I thought it was going to be very, very close, and I said that to the audience in the hospitality before it. I had been doing a gig, speaking at a gig on Friday, and speaking to a lot of Rangers fans there, and they felt that Rangers were there for the taking because they don't think they're very good. They're not happy with McCoist, but, I didn't share in that enthusiasm for a Hearts walkover at all. I thought there was going to be one goal in it, and it could come down to a refereeing decision or a bit of luck or whatever, but I thought we've started similar to that, like we did against Queen of the South, and eventually got the upper hand there. Same against Wraith Rovers, with the exception of the Oztuert goal. We never really got into that game at all. And I thought we started that way. I know there were a few comments about Hearts looking nervous. I don't think they were nervous. I just think Rangers closed us down really quickly. They pushed quite far into our half, so we were having to defend a whole lot deeper. Therefore, we didn't have the freedom to pass the ball like they normally do out of defence and across the back. So it was not so much backs to the ball, but a bit tougher than we're used to. I have no doubt that the game hinged on the sending off in the 20th minute. I thought it was justified at the time. Having seen it, yeah, okay, you could argue possibly it maybe was a yellow, but when you see that for the first time at full speed, it looks like a red card, much as the other two tackles looked like a red card to me as well. They were lucky to finish with 10 men. I think they could have finished with 8 or even 9 or whatever. But I thought, wonderful result. We didn't play particularly well in the first half, and there's been a few times this season where we haven't played well, and we've still picked up points, and I think that's the sign of potential champions. How much easier is your job as the hype man at Tynecastle made when you've got a team that you can actually hype? Now, that's not meant in a disrespectful way to previous teams, but we have struggled through the years of turmoil to get a team out there that is capable of achieving what we believe we should be capable of. Of course, this season we've got a product on the park, and everybody can get excited. And I'm really just a fan with a microphone, so I get just as excited as anyone else. Last year was really, really tough. And what tends to happen in circumstances like that is that the critics that I have, and there are a few, suddenly ramp up the pressure, and particularly on forums where you get a lot of people who follow like sheep join in the conversation where they're criticising my music choice, they're criticising the way we bring out the teams, blah, blah, blah. And then you get to situations like this where you get no criticisms at all and only praise. So you take the rough with the smooth, but it's certainly a whole lot easier when the team on the park are playing like they're playing at the moment. They are a joy to watch.
Say that I'm not going to be happy until he plays Hardcore Rave at half time, to be fair. I'm one of those people.
I'm open to most things, but bear in mind the limitations of our sound system. That's why you don't hear any, apart from the fact it's CAC, you don't hear any heavy metal or anything like that. And you also have to bear in mind, and occasionally I get criticism whereby I'm pleasing myself, which to a large extent is absolutely true. It's my sound system, and I'm playing what I want to play. But no, really, I think a lot of it just comes down to experience. I've been a DJ since I was 15 years old, and so that's a long, long time. I pride myself in being able to read a crowd wherever I am, but you bear in mind that the average demographic of a football fan is a hairy-arsed man aged 25 to 35, and he doesn't want to hear One Direction, he doesn't want to hear
Well, I do.
Anything that's well, yeah, or hardcore techno or house or whatever the category happens to be at the time. And so I tend to play. It is a very male-orientated music selection, but a lot of it, and I do get a lot of plaudits for it. And yes, I did win Stadium Announcer of the Year for 3 or 4 years on the bounce.
Not that you like to mention it, Scott.
No, just because you were obviously going to get to that.
We will read your list of awards at the end of the interview. I didn't want to make you uncomfortable at the start.
We'll do it an hour, Sam.
So on the subject of music, Scott, that was a particularly pertinent point of the weekend. There was lots of threads on forums that no doubt at least got brought to your attention of people requesting specific, possibly inflammatory songs to be played on Saturday, just so we know for future, so we can maybe save you having to deal with these Facebook messages and kickback threads asking you to play songs that you're probably not allowed to play. What is the directive on songs that may be seen by some as banter and seen by others as wind-ups or at least inflammatory?
Well, funnily enough, one was brought to my attention pre-match. I had done my usual sound check and was walking along the track towards the Gorgie suite when the match delegate from the SFA collared me and said, "I hear you're playing Achy Breaky Heart." And I'm like, why on earth would I play Achy Breaky Heart? He said, "Oh, there was something on a forum," and he told me the name of the forum, and it's right, okay, well, your life's obviously that empty that you have to read said forum, but no, I certainly won't be. Also, before any of the Ugly Sisters come, I usually get a request to play Gypsies, Tramps and Thieves. There's a lot asking for Zombie Nation, Zombie by the Cranberries, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, all very well and good, and you get a couple of minutes of a kick from that, but ultimately you get a whole lot of resentment from the fans of the other clubs. And when you break it down to a purely business decision, these are paying customers and I'm there to entertain. Obviously, I'm happy to wind them up, but stuff like that, as you say, it's inflammatory, and we're better than that. We're a professional organisation, and a lot of people benchmark us. They'll go to other stadia and they'll go, "Oh, it's not as good a presentation as Hearts," because we're up there and they put us on a pedestal, rightly or wrongly. But I guess that's the standard that other grounds try to attain. And I go to away matches and the stadium announcers think they'll noise us up by playing the Proclaimers, and it's like, oh, crap. Sing your own songs and celebrate your own club, because all it does is makes us think that you're small-minded.
While we're on the subject of ensuring entertainment for all punters then, you have the job, sometimes I'm sure it'll be a privilege, other times possibly not, of interviewing legends at half-time at games and on other occasions, such as when we've been fortunate enough to win trophies. I remember one specific time when Rudy Scatchell point blank refused to talk to you. But in general, who's the best, or who have been the best and the worst players to deal with? And not saying that in any way bad people, but who is it difficult to get to open up or show their true selves when you interview them on the pitch at half time?
There's a lot of players that are just shy and they're not keen on speaking in public. And bear in mind that whenever you see surveys about people's greatest fear, talking in public is normally in the top 3. Mm-hmm. So you can understand their reticence to get involved in something like that in case they stammer or they come over as sounding stupid or anything of that ilk. So who's the best, who's the worst? Generally, you'll find that Neil McCann is particularly good now because of his background in the media. He's always great at taking a laugh as well, because you point out the fact that he'll draw attention to the fact that he's on Sky at least a dozen times during any 60-second interview, and he takes that very well. The older heats like Donald Ford, who was my hero when I was growing up, Dave McPherson is great, who we had on Saturday. Dave's always up for a laugh, and for instance, in the suite on Saturday, I had Alex McDonald, the former Hearts manager. I had Willie Bud Johnson, best known for, I went through all his achievements and highlighted to the crowd that we had 350 in the suite on Saturday, by the way, and highlighted that he's best known for being sent home from a World Cup simply for taking a drug that a lot of people take, me included, during the summer to ward off hay fever, and of course he gets this all the time, and he shrugged his shoulders, but he came out with a few good stories and some really, really good banter. So these guys, the old heads, they've been there, they've done it. Generally, they know what's coming. Robbo's another prime example. If ever we get a guest that doesn't show up, Robbo fills in. The crowd love him, and he knows what buttons to press, what phrases to come out with. You probably remember that when we were going through our darkest period, Robbo came on the park at half-time, and he came out with a line that this club will never die as long as I have a breath in my body. And that's fantastic. That's a real soundbite, and knowing when to utter things like this is a real talent. And so he's up there, he's great. Scott Crabbe, for example, is a friend of mine, he's a neighbour of mine. We see each other all the time. We've got a really good bit of banter going on, and he knows fine well when he comes up that he's going to get absolutely slaughtered, and he enters into the spirit of it, and that's wonderful. That's really, really good. So I think there's a lot of them that are just dead shy, particularly the kids. Jason Holt is a good guy. He speaks relatively quietly though, and with them they've all had their media training and they know the phrases to use, and so it can get a wee bit predictable, but it's difficult for anybody that's not used to speaking into a microphone for a protracted period and trying to be themselves.
Well, we spoke with Barry Anderson before your good self came on, Scott, about the current gaffer and his media delivery style, and the fact that he's particularly calm and softly spoken. Sometimes at the point where it's difficult to hear. Is he at the wind-up? Does he talk like that to you?
He talks like that all the time. You know, if you get him behind a microphone, in front of a microphone, when there's no microphones around, when you're sitting speaking to him at a party or whatever, he's exactly the same. He's just that type of guy. I joked about him because the subject came up on Saturday in the suite, and I said he made Stephen Presley sound like an after-dinner speaker. And he's just, it's not droll or anything, it's just him. And if you analysed him on an oscilloscope, for example, to use that as an analogy, whereby most people, like me, he would get really excited at some things and then down about other things. He is kind of middle of the road, and there would just be a wee, a flat sine wave going along the middle of the screen when he's talking. So that was a massive 3 points on Saturday. Because of that, you would expect a manager to get really, really high about it. Not him. It's just another 3 points. He's keeping everybody's feet on the ground. And so when our defeat does finally come, he won't be getting carried away down to the depths of despair. He'll just pick it up, take it on the chin, and move on. And I think he's been classy. He's been dignified. He's just been a breath of fresh air. If you take his interview, I don't know what was in yesterday's Scotland on Sunday or something, and he was asked about the rumbustious nature of the game, and he said, well, that's football. He said, and the guys got to learn to take their foot out rather than leave their foot in. Once they've won the ball, take their foot out, and that way they're not going to get hit by high challenges such as we suffered yesterday. Now, that's great. Cast your mind back to, was it a year and a half ago, and big Jesse McPate gets hit by Ryan Stevenson, and oh my God, it was like he was crying to a school teacher running at Willie Collins saying the big boy kicked me and ran away. And then his wee weedy manager gets in the act with the press as well, saying that Hearts are big bully boys. Oh, grow up here, for God's sake. So whilst I think that John Daly had a bit of a cheek coming out in the press this morning saying that some players went down too easily and were crying like girls, he does have a point. And you saw it exemplified in Scotland versus England last week when the players all knew one another. There was no dive-in. If there was any rough challenges, the boys tried to ride them or go through them, and it was completely different. And then you get games. Saturday wasn't a good example from that because there weren't any dives. The likes of Miko or Suso, etc., would have gone down relatively easily and would have let everybody know about it. I don't think we have a team such as that anymore. So I thought Daly's comments were a wee bit harsh, but I think where he was coming from was absolutely right.
Okay, couple of final questions, Scott, before we let you get away and get a relatively early night, and we will get on with general banter, and we'll let Mikey have a wee go back at you about that Hibs comment there. The final couple of questions, in terms of your experience on a match day, how much of your viewing of the game is affected by your role?
All of it. It was the same. I used to be the play caller for the Scottish Claymores, you know, the American football
Yes.
team. And the only time I generally got to enjoy a game was when I was physically in the crowd. So if the Claymores were involved, then I would be watching it, obviously, but watching it from a perspective of how did that formation line up, who's likely to be the wide receiver, are they going to run the ball here, so that as soon as the play stopped, I was able to give out the information. It's the same. I'm also writing a match report during each half to present to a radio station pre-match, half-time and full-time. So I'm taking down notes for that during the game. I'm also trying to ascertain, for instance, if Osman So scores so that I can play Magic or whatever. So it's kind of viewing it from a different perspective from everybody else. I'm still enjoying it, but I'm not as immersed in the game because I'm aware of stuff that's going on round about, such as substitutions, etc., etc.
Do you think you'll ever get tired of those responsibilities and want to go back to just watching it as a supporter, or does it bring a totally different feeling with it and a sense of enjoyment?
I've been trying to get back to being a supporter since 2002. I did say to Hearts at the time I was only doing the job for 3 weeks, and here I am 12 years later, I'm still here. So from that perspective, the answer is a kind of half yes. I do love it. I'm privileged because I've probably got the best view in the stadium. I get to stand during the whole match, and I'm privileged in so much that I know all the team. A lot of them are personal friends. So from a fan's perspective, I'm closer than most people could hope to be, and I'm very, very lucky. So no, I don't think I'd ever complain about it, principally because I know that I'm so privileged, and a lot of people would give their eye teeth to what I do.
Yeah, well, we'll be here chipping away, Scott, working away. If at any point, if you check in with us periodically, if you're ever tired of it and you feel that any of us have got anywhere near your standards, one of us will be happy to take on the mantle, at least even just to give you 3 weeks off. If you want to go on a holiday, one of us will give it a go. We can even do it on a rotation basis.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much indeed. Incidentally, I didn't answer your question earlier on about music. The only one song I've been told not to play is Seven Nation Army by the White Stripes.
Understandably so, yeah.
After the Cup semi-final. And Lothian and Borders got in touch with me and said that I wasn't to play that because it encourages homophobic chanting.
Yeah, I think
and I pointed out that it was absolutely ridiculous for anybody to believe that the Highbees are gay, but their boyfriends are. And the inspector didn't seem to think it was funny in front of everybody, but privately admitted that he did think it was quite a good line. So, no, I think you just have to be aware that these are paying customers, and yes, they're there to be noised up, but do it discreetly and surreptitiously, because it's much more effective. For instance, a couple of seasons ago, Rangers had visited and they had gone through the entire gamut of party songs, and it just sickens me in this day and age that they're still getting away with that. And at the end, I said, thanks very much indeed for coming. Whether you're headed home or back to the 17th century, we wish you a safe journey and look forward to welcoming you back. And a lot of the people round about me was sharp intake of breath, and oh my God, you'll get into trouble for that. And the good thing is it went right over the head of the knuckle draggers, and the ones that did get it realised the spirit in which it was delivered, and it was all very much tongue-in-cheek. And I think that's something that's absolutely essential for a job like mine. You have to keep your tongue in your cheek. You also have to become slightly detached, because there are certain referees who I personally don't like at all, who I think have it in for Hearts, and so it angers me greatly. And there's times where you want to grab the mic and say something, you just think, nah, it's ridiculous. Just take a step back, take a deep breath, and deal with it.
I just wanted, before you went, to personally thank you myself. About, I think it was a year ago, I was annoying you on Facebook, basically saying, can you play my band at half time? But then I mentioned that my grandfather was Hector Nichol, and then you went, oh, absolutely, I'll play it for you. And
who was your band?
It was the Heretics, called the Heretics, but that was, again, it was about 2 years ago, and you asked for a couple of songs. I ended up sending you one that didn't have too much bass in it, because as we all know, the speakers at Tynecastle aren't the very best.
Absolutely. There's also another local band that I've been playing quite a lot that I got sent, called the Begbys.
Oh yeah, I've actually heard of them actually. Yeah.
I really like them, and there's been a couple of people got in touch and asked if I'll play their stuff. And again, if you submit it and it sounds bouncy enough. I don't mean that in a kind of techno term. I mean up rather than being want to slit your wrists Radiohead sound track. Then it would be in with a chance of getting it. So not always happy. And again, I'm just there to entertain the public. And if the public want to hear something particularly, then I would be wrong not to play it.
Yeah, and I just wanted to personally thank you for that. And funnily enough, to tie in, we're hopefully looking at a second show that will incorporate somehow as to local music. But again, we'll keep you all informed and hopefully get you involved as well in that.
Absolutely.
Because we know that you'll get quite a lot of music sent to you from local kind of acts, so we'll probably steal it off you.
You're more than welcome.
Cheers for that, mate.
Okay, Scott, final question then.
Music piracy, you understand.
Final question, Scott. We can't let you go without asking your thoughts on where Hearts going to finish in this league.
I was asked exactly this question earlier on a football forum. I think there's a long way to go. Nothing has been won yet except plaudits, but I'd rather be 9 points ahead of Rangers than 9 points behind our local rivals, 16 points behind. I think it's curtains. I think they'll end up top four along with Queen of the South, but I think it'll finish Hearts first and Rangers second, although we've still to go through a dip. I'd like to think that our dip came against Hibs and Wraith Rovers, and that we've ridden it out, but no team can carry on going through the season playing like we did against the likes of Livingston and Falkirk, much as I'd love to see it. But I think we will have enough. The pressure will grow. There is no doubt about that. And that was another thing, by the way. I was going to play Under Pressure by Queen on Saturday, but I was getting grief from BT Sport because they were still doing their malarkey at the side of the pitch. I think the pressure will grow because Robbie's keeping everybody so grounded and we're not getting too carried away with the highs. I think we'll be able to handle the lows a whole lot better than we otherwise would. So, again, let's wait and see. It's early days. Let's enjoy the ride and see where it takes us. But I genuinely believe we have enough talent and importantly, enough depth in the squad. We're losing Morgaro Gomez for the Queen's game. Have a look at Miguel Pallardo on Saturday, head and shoulders above everybody on that field. He hasn't had a pre-season. Suddenly he's coming into form, just as Gomez is going to go out for a rest. We were missing Prince as well on Saturday with an unfortunate ailment, and we were able to cover for it. And we Holt, he came in for his first start in I don't know how many games and was absolutely magnificent. So I think we have the strength and depth, and with a few breaks here and there, which are obviously absolutely crucial, I think we can do it.
Scott, great to speak to you. Thank you very much for your time. We
been a pleasure.
Much appreciate it. Well, hopefully it has, and hopefully we can have you on again in the future. But we really appreciate you speaking to us. Thanks very much for your time, Scott.
No problem, guys. Thanks very much.
Cheers.
Cheers now.
Okay, we're going to go for a quick break. Then we're going to change tact completely, because I know Hibs listeners, it's been a wee bit challenging so far. So we're going to finally get round to talking about your 6-3 win at the weekend, because, Mikey, no one else really has spoken about it, have they?
Negative.
Indeed. So we're going to talk about it next, and then essentially we'll talk about Hearts until Scott has to go for the last bus home. So we're going to go a couple of adverts, and then we will be back shortly. And we're back on Monday Night Fitba. Mikey, as you've been abandoned by Connor on his travels to first see Arnold Schwarzenegger and now to work 80 hours a week, I believe, what I thought we would do is keep everyone involved to a certain extent, but we'll focus on yourself. But we'll maybe jump for comment, because thanks to Connor's generosity in lending us his Hibs TV details.
I did quite a mean Connor impression.
Do you?
No, not well. No. It's physical. I can't do it on radio, so
right. Thanks for volunteering though. But thanks to him giving us his Hibs TV login details. We've seen as many highlights as exist of this game, so we're as qualified as anyone who wasn't there. Mikey, 6-3. Given that we spent a big chunk of last week talking about defensive stability, did you see that one come in?
Well, I think defence is overrated sometimes. No, certainly never. I think I said to my dad recently, somebody was due an absolute doing off us because we've missed an absolutely obscene amount of chances in the last probably 4 or 5 games. I didn't anticipate us also getting a doing in the same game for 20 minutes.
Jimmy Calderwood School of Defending, I think it was.
Pretty much. I think, to be honest, the 3 goals were just, they came in a spell when obviously we were comfortably ahead. They've switched off. It's going to happen from time to time. There's still a lot of players in that team that were part of the bad days last season who, when they drop a goal or 2, are going to have a bit of a panic. But we can whinge and moan all day about that. But 6 goals away from home, fantastic performance. Scott Allen's just really, really playing like a supremely high level at the moment. Clearly match fit now, and he's dominating matches. He's hugely influential. Whether he's kind of dropping out wide or he's playing for the middle of the park, he's really making a difference. Malonga's come back, showing how much we missed him last week. Not just taking chances, but he finds good spaces, brings other guys into the game. All round a great performance, and you can forgive a couple of sort of defensive wobbles if we're going to score 6. Unfortunately, last season we're having those wobbles and scoring 0, which kind of is how we find ourselves where we are right now. So, no, good turnaround. Yeah,
on such a positive weekend for Edinburgh football, we are certainly going to accentuate the positives here. So let's do so on Dominic Malonga. It's a funny one because, as we mentioned in our conversations earlier, he's now scored 9 goals in 11 games, which is a pretty fantastic strike rate, especially for someone who came in after the start of the season, missed pre-season. He's really up and running. But probably up until Saturday, I don't know if in general we've actually realised how well he's fit in, at least in terms of goals to games, because he maybe has drifted in and out or maybe struggled to really impact certain games. How pleased are you with, and how hopeful are you for what's to come in the season ahead now with him?
Absolutely. I think he doesn't seem the kind of player that will dominate a match. Possibly a lot of Hibs fans who were there at the weekend would say that Scott Allen was the guy who dominated the game. Malonga scored the hat-trick and he might not even have been man of the match possibly. But it's been a while since we've had a guy who kind of just sort of keeps around the side of matches, puts the ball in the back of the net when he gets a chance. We've had too many guys who want the ball all the time and don't have any end product. So it's nice to have somebody who, might not be the guy who busts a gut constantly. He's been getting a wee bit of stick on some of the forums for maybe not looking like he's the busiest guy in the world, but who cares?
As long as he's effective.
I think we're currently in a league where we can just about carry 10.5 players for large parts of it. So no complaints. I think that it could be quite exciting when El Algui is fit again. I think they'll be quite a good foil for each other. Even though Malonga's a relatively tall guy, he's not a target man, and I think he'll play really well off somebody like El Algui. Cummins is quite sort of manfully trying to develop his game, being able to play with his back to goal, and Cummins had a fantastic game at the weekend. He was hugely involved in a lot of the good stuff that Hibs did, just didn't quite get his goal. But I think there's a lot of exciting things to look forward to. Fortunately, we're going to lose him for a bit, or we expect to lose him for a bit.
Yes.
Obviously, his country have qualified for the African nations. Hopefully, they discover some other outstanding talent before then, and he doesn't quite make the cut. But I think we'd rather have our guys getting identified like that, and he's going to go away, hopefully play against better sides and become a better player. And it's a chance for somebody else to shine, but I think there's a lot to look forward to. The field's getting better. Scott Allen's just been superb. We went back to a good shape at the weekend. It's been working for us. We kind of eliminated the sort of winger situation. Liam Craig had a good game. 2 assists. Who seen that coming?
It looked, from the highlights that I've seen, which are the only highlights that exist, unfortunately, he seemed to be a lot more advanced than we would necessarily expect him to be. I mean, there was one, the assist for I think Malonga's first goal. He actually probably should have tried to go himself more than he did. He played with his back to goal and slipped Malonga through, but he was the furthest man forward in that period.
He was beyond the strikers, which is I think we all thought this was the kind of midfielder we were signing.
Yes,
who was going to be an extra forward at times. So obviously Robertson coming back on the side gave him a wee bit more freedom to get further up the park. even when he's previously played alongside either McGeoch or Allen in this kind of like sort of the two sides of the diamond, if you like, he still hasn't seemed that further up the park. Although I think one of the games possibly against Hearts, where it wasn't against Hearts, somebody else we played against, but maybe didn't have quite that licence to get forward. But great performance. He had a couple of ropey moments, but we all I think all the guys in the team at some point had a bit of a flap when they were putting more pressure on us. But if we can get that level of performance from him regularly, hopefully a couple of assists just gives him that belief again, and sort of, rubbing off on guys, sort of Alan rubbing off on him a wee bit almost. Hopefully give us a wee bit of stability going forward and a contribution to goals from midfield, which I think we've sort of lacked.
I also seen him over the weekend doing that marathon bet challenge. I don't know if you've seen that on Facebook.
I did. I saw
he was the top scorer.
He got 2 out of 5, and I think Hibs are above West Ham, is it?
Yes, that's right.
So,
to be fair, they've got 2, you got 3.
times.
Jason,
we're top of some league.
Jason Cummings, touch of an angel, certainly deserted him that day. I think he says at the end, can we go now, I'm starving, or something along those lines, because he literally just, I mean, those could have gone anywhere. It was just like, as long as I kick them, does that count?
Go to Nando's.
He had obviously, it was a wee bit inconvenienced by that whole experience. I think they could be well up the leaderboard, or they could have an unassailable lead. They're ahead of West Ham for now, but some big guns to come there.
It's big time.
That's the real challenge for the season.
Maybe the glamour of Soccer M's crossbar challenge, but
it's like when Hearts fans used to, back in the early 90s, when Hearts were decent at the 10 and 6s, and that became the big one. As long as we win that, that's
on
really
the official honour roll.
That's really what it's all about. I think we all know that. Right, one final positive and one final negative before we bring the Jambos in. Positive, the character. The fact that it came back to 3-2 and back to 4-3, and they carried on. It was mentioned on Hibs TV that there was wee thoughts going back to that 6-6 game, and Alan Stubbs said there was, at the start of the season, that would have gone a different way. How pleasing is it now that the players rode that out and got on with winning the game?
Fantastic. I think last season, absolutely, we would have crumbled at that point. Partly because of the confidence, partly playing against better teams. I think it does help with playing against slightly our inferior sides to what we were playing last year, so we can possibly make those mistakes with the confidence that we still have enough up top to turn it back around. I think Stubbs also made some substitutions that actually changed the game a wee bit for us at that point, which he's been getting a bit of sort of stick for in past matches. Either they think that he's crippling the sort of confidence at half time, making the wrong changes, but brought Sam Stanton on, bit of fresh legs, bit of running power as well, and again got beyond the strikers. When he scored his goal, he was the sort of counter attack, he was furthest forward, put through by Liam Craig. Good finish. So he had a positive influence on the match when it could have gone the wrong way. I don't think there's been a lot of managers in the last few years in the Hibs dugout who have made those correct changes to turn around the tide that's coming against us. So that was positive to see, and again, great character for the players to stand up to it.
The one real negative of the game then, obviously on the face of it, it's clearly a negative conceding 3 goals, but especially when you watch the goals back, one of them was decent quality, good strike, but probably should have been shut down.
Yep.
2 of them are fairly basic crosses into the box that Hibs failed to deal with. How worrying is it that you're still susceptible to those types of goals?
I think that, as you see me have me down as the defensive sort of defender of Hibs, we've defended really well recently, and it's hard to deal with a guy like Colin Nish. He's a ruthless ruthless operator up there. But no, it was I think especially the second goal, when you see it in slow motion, Fontaine standing pointing at the guy, acknowledging that he exists, and looks to the closest man to him and just steps further and further away from him. They had about 3 guys in the box at the time, and I think we had about 6 players in there. So that was slack. The first goal could probably be put down to just a wee bit of lack of concentration. Second was perhaps a bit of that and a bit of the kind of bottle not quite crashing, but a bit of a worry. Like I say, third goal was a decent goal, but I don't, also got my crystal ball out, I don't believe that it's an area we've suffered in a lot this season. We've been losing daft goals with daft mistakes, but it's not often been from set pieces, cross balls. It's just been lack of concentration, in open play. So my hope is that it's just a one-off. But if we can go 6 goals every week, then what's a couple of goals? So that's the plan, to keep on scoring 6.
To be fair, I was going to say that, like you say with Colin this, you probably won't face that kind of aerial bombardment regularly in the season, but then you've still got Rangers to play. So
with elbows to deal with.
Elbows
two
and the gang.
forearms. It's like a cock duel. You've got forearms daily as well there.
4 heads.
Okay, so before we move on to the Hearts panel discussion, at least obviously we've spoken about them a fair bit, but with a guest.
Have we not finished on the Hearts game yet?
No, actually we've not spoken about the controversial. Scott's got, as we know, Scott is prone to a wee chip on his shoulder from media comments, so he's got quite a few things to get off his chest.
Can I just chip in as well? Can I just remind everybody that I predicted 2-0 last week?
You did. You were the only one.
10 unpleasant as it feels.
Well, just like I predicted 6-3 last week, so you know.
Okay, on the Hibs result then, boys, what were the impressions of that from a Jambo perspective? Was it surprising to see Hibs putting 6 past the team?
If it wasn't Dumbarton, you know. But
Mikey, he gives with one hand.
Scored against Dumbarton this season?
To be fair, we've put lots of goals past lots of different teams.
We failed to score against Dumbarton, to be fair. We drew 0-0, but we beat them 5-1 at Tynecastle.
Yeah, plus I think Ian Murray's comments, I think everyone's read them, of this whole parking the bus thing. I think he had the chip on his shoulder about that and set his team out accordingly. But no, I mean, end of the day, Mikey said it. He said their team were due to do someone. That team was Dumbarton. They did concede 3 goals, but at the end of the day, he scored 6. It was obviously one of those games where it was just opened up, and every time Hibs scored, it seemed Dumbarton came back, but then Hibs just pulled away. And you've got that star player like Malonga who can just pull out the bag, and that was the difference. I mean, it must have been a good game to watch. Obviously, we didn't get to see it. I've still not even seen the highlights, but yeah, I mean, good for them. Very good.
Scott, we spoke last week about the idea, at least we like to perpetuate it in this studio because it makes it a wee bit easier for us all to get on at challenging times, that Edinburgh football can sort of unite behind one common goal this season to a certain extent, which is both teams getting promoted at the expense of everyone else. From a Hearts perspective, is it a positive thing to see Hibs achieving at the moment and maybe threatening to put together a run of form, in that if Rangers' minor implosion continues, they may actually get drawn into more of a battle with Hibs than with us?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still naively sort of daydreaming here there being a joint party at the end of the year when, Hearts go up hopefully as champions and Hibs finish second and do St Mirren in the playoff final. It has been really, really good to see, especially that after last week there was a little bit of negative chat, and we were, obviously guilty of it as well. But you can see how much Malonga brings to the team after seeing Hibs without him in the side. He's a bit like he is one of these characters that sometimes looks like he's not interested when he's playing, but you can tell that he's probably a cut above that level, because when he does play, even at sort of maybe 75% of his capability, he's capable of scoring 2 or 3 goals, no problem at all.
Right, Scott's comments lead us perfectly on to the Hearts game, because there was an interesting point I thought made by Alan Stubbs in his post-match comments about Hibs game at the weekend in comparison to the game the week before, where he mentioned that, well, a lot of the result, the 0-0 draw the week previous, can be put down to the fact that there was really 4 first choice players who were missing, who returned for the game this weekend, and you saw the fluency that brought, the improvement that it brought in general terms to the team. Hearts this weekend, we've had a lot of the time over the last few months, we've had this thing mentioned of when injuries and suspensions kick in. I don't know if there's a time that will be more depleted than we were in terms of first choice, first name on the team sheet type players than Saturday. How huge is it that we managed to win the game by hook or by crook? Not discussing that how we won it yet. How massive is it that we won it despite missing those players? I
would probably say that we were at our most depleted whenever Wee Hollis had to go in goals. Anyone who had to watch it, anyone who had to watch him in those cup games has to agree that was definitely when we were at our weakest.
He was alright at Stenhouse.
No. I mean, it was really positive. I mean, I think I probably texted a couple of my mates when I read the team news, and I thought, well, on the bad side, we've no Nicholson, no Boabin, no Wilson, but on the good side, Moshney's playing for Rangers, and that was the positive for me, looking at the two teams. And I have to admit, I mean, watching Rangers play, even in the first half when they were pressing the ball well, there was nothing about them that was any better than watching Raith Rovers come to Tynecastle 2 weeks beforehand. Yeah, they pressed the ball well, but you knew Hearts, even 11 on 11, Hearts got the fitter players, the better players, and in the second half I still think we would have went on and won a game like that against 11 guys. I just didn't think Rangers looked like threatening. They had that one chance, for Law right after we scored the first goal.
Yeah.
But apart from that, they were honking. I mean, that's it. they were awful.
Ross, do you agree, even taking the sending off out of it, were you still confident that Hearts would have won?
Well, it depends on, I suppose, if Ali McCoist kept that style of play going. They obviously set it a certain way to aerial bombard us from the get-go. They did have a lot of the ball for the first half hour, and the sending off, I think somebody would have got sent off throughout the game, so I think we would have won for that reason. If they had 11 players in the park, maybe it was a different story. It would have been a lot tighter. Maybe would have sneaked a goal, maybe it would have been a draw. But I think it was the type of game where there was going to be someone sent off for Rangers. They were just flying at the challenges left, right and centre. They were lucky to still have 7 men on the park. It was getting to that stage. So I think the timing of the sending off absolutely affected the result, but I still think there would have been someone later on that was got sent off.
I think that's a great point, and it's something that I've not heard enough people make, at least in the aftermath of the game, when people are trying to defend Ali McCoist and saying that, well, how can he legislate for an overzealous challenge like that, or someone getting overly up for the game. I would be very, very surprised if Ali McCoist's team talk, given how his team performed and the methods that they employed to try and get the victory, I would be very surprised if his team talk wasn't relatively confrontational in terms of, you have to make sure that 70-30s become yours, you need to be as in their faces as possible. And when it gets to that point, when you're encouraging that level of physicality in your tactics, well, you live by the sword, you die by the sword.
And then after his comments as well, the comments after the game, he was getting a lot of credit for some reason of being humility and stuff, but at the end of the day he was sheepish.
He was passing the buck.
He threw Stevie Smith under the bus. There's absolutely no question.
Yeah. So I don't see why he got any credit from that, because he was the one that caused it.
Noticeably, he said about Miller about it was borderline, and that was the one area you would give him slight credit for, in that he actually has fronted up to that challenge more than the media have. I mean, if you watched Sports Scene last night, you thought that was a genuine, those were both genuine attempts just to block the ball. If Boyd's trying to block the ball, he's 2 yards too close to the man and he's gone with the wrong foot. But that's no being analysed.
Smith's one was the weakest one.
For me, I think if you're looking at it in layman's terms, not knowing the rules, you look at the Miller one, or if you've still got your 1970s glasses on, you look at Miller's one and you say he won the ball. But the fact is, it's a coward's challenge, because the fact that he wins the ball disguises the fact that he's gone with the studs right through behind the thing, and that's what does McHatty's ligaments.
And that's him out, yeah.
Aye. Boyd's one, he actually kind of makes sure that he catches McHatty, because at that point, if you pull out, you make no contact with him whatsoever, or it's a wee bit clumsy collision, but you don't catch studs right on the ankle bone. And like you say, I think the thing that does for Stevie Smith is the fact his trailing leg catches Patterson as well. The fact that you've so little control, both legs catch the guy, because you're just, he's gone 4 yards probably off the ground, at which point you can't say that you're in control at that stage. So Mikey, from a Hibs perspective, when you see those, do you think they're all red cards?
I agree with your point on the Miller one, especially in the heat of the moment, for the referee to see it one time only. You're looking at, was there enough contact on the ball? Was he with it? Did he retain enough control making the tackle? Could have been a red card. I feel as though if it was a guy in a Hearts jersey making that tackle, you would be off him if he got sent off. And in the heat of the moment, you might have went, he's won the ball, he's taken the ball, it's a big match, it's a heat of the moment. Stevie Smith could have got away with a yellow, but I think a red card was the right call. Boyd, not proven.
But it's funny because it happens so often with these debates that it becomes a Hearts versus Rangers thing. And if you've got maroon tinted specs, you think this. If you've got blue tinted specs, you think the other way. But in actual fact, the Boyd one, for example, that doesn't affect us in the slightest. In that, well, what, he would have gone up, we were 2.5 up anyway.
We'll put it this way, I mean,
but it could affect Hibs more, and that those things then lead to suspensions for them coming to Easter Road or them going to play other teams. That means that they're then catchable, exactly as you say with the not proven thing with Boyd before. It wasn't Hibs that were going to benefit for that, although they could indirectly because other teams would get a result. But these are the things, I think, from an Edinburgh perspective, we do look at and we think they all seem to go for the Old Firm when it doesn't really, well, it's no life or death if he sends off, we'll just give him a yellow card. But they mount up over the season.
Absolutely. I think as well, it might be the case that the way Boyd's playing, it's not a terrible thing he's not suspended. Obviously he got dropped for that match. Who would have thought that Chris Boyd would be dropped for a top of the league clash in the Championship? Like, he should be, that's the reason he was signed, to score goals in those games. He's been papped onto the bench, he's come on maybe with a bee in his bonnet as well, and a bit of huff, and just completely got the wrong end of it. But I think that you're right. I think there seems to be an unnecessary leniency. If a side's getting leathered 4-0 in a cup match, guy makes a late challenge, just give him a booking, it's fine, it's late on, it's just a wee team.
Yeah, Robbie Nielsen must have looked across at Ali McCoy and seen Chris Boyd about to get warmed up, and then Lewis McLeod comes off, and he must be going, what's this guy doing? What's this guy doing?
Wild card.
Okay, let's sacrifice a midfielder and get a defender on, push him forward. But we were going 3 at the box. It was just incredible.
That seems to be the point that very few people seem to have touched upon about the Miller and Boyd tackles. I mean, I'd say that, especially Miller, it probably is quite out of character, and it's probably indicative of two guys who now realise that they're throwing away their Rangers legacy by signing up with this joker of a manager. And you could tell that there's probably a lot of frustration involved in those tackles. Not that I'm defending, they're both red card tackles, I'm not defending them, but in terms of, they probably weren't, born of McCoy's telling them beforehand, look, win your 50-50s, win your 70-30s. They looked like two guys that were just, doing their own thing, to be honest, at times on the park. Boyd came on, probably unhappy that he's been thrown on at 1-0 with 10 minutes to go, and at that stage it was 2-0, the game was lost, and he looked like, I'll just see if I can maybe try and take a guy out with me. I mean, really, guys like that now, I think, are finally realising that, there's no rainbow at the end at the end here. There's no end result. There's no long-term strategy at that club.
Considering they're winding down as well in their careers, and
okay, enough Rangers chat. Right, that's the kibosh.
Carl Davidson's,
that's the kibosh on the Rangers.
Some like Bell.
But before we go back to Hearts and focus on certain players and their performances, that does touch on the idea, Scott. This idea that there's a magical rainbow at the end of this, and this is just the storm, and at the end it all becomes magic again, and we're the old Rangers. The old Rangers didn't exist, and I think from a fan's perspective outside of that, we're starting to see that now. Even people who were wary of it and thought, but they've still got the experience, and they've still, well, you know what, the team with the experience and who could really deal with the pressure, they would have won that game on Saturday. And the fact that they've not is now starting to show there are chinks in the armour, and if there are enough of them shown, if they go to Easter Road and Hibs beat them, I think now we're starting to see there's no real fear factor here. But the media aren't acknowledging that yet.
I wonder if they can cope with the pressure.
Aye, and we saw that on Sports Scene last night, where Callum Davidson numerous times just pressure.
He seemed to balk at the thought of saying Hearts were favourites. I mean, Stephen Thompson at least seemed to sort of recognise us as top of the league. Callum Davidson, it was like, it's not the 90s anymore. It's not even 10 years ago or 5 years ago. Things have changed. They're the Rangers.
Should we be brushing this off and simply be bigger than it? Should it be, 9 points clear in the league table does the talking? Or is it just too galling that logic doesn't seem to enter their minds at all?
I'm afraid, given what I've had to read and listen to over the last 24 hours, it's hard not to respond to that. I mean, it was absolutely ridiculous, Sports Scene last night. I mean, clear. How these people get picked, I don't know if it's a lucky dip or what it is. But honestly, I mean, get John Rankin back on. At least he can talk English. At least English seems to be his first language.
I think Callum Davidson's picked for his good looks, surely.
You could watch a drive-by movie on his forehead. It's massive.
But yeah, I know that you had a wee reaction to that, because it is galling to hear people just throw logic or experience out the window. We're supposed to, pundits are supposed to go based on facts rather than just feelings.
Barry Ferguson had a column last week, and he was very, generous about Hearts. He credited us for playing really well, playing well at pace and fluency in our game. And then at the end of it, after saying all that stuff, says, yeah, but Rangers are still going to win. Well, you've just said all the evidence that points towards a Hearts win, but you're still saying Rangers are going to win. Yeah. Again, lacky logic.
It does really just feel based on this idea that the old firm find a way to win.
Yeah.
And they
but
seem
that's
to
on the
think
basis of it being the old firm.
the way they're talking is if Hibs don't exist as well. Hibs have got a lot more to say about Rangers where they finish than I think Hearts do, because we've played them twice now. Hibs have got another three times to play them, and is it twice at Easter Road? You know what I mean? So
I don't see that Rangers team improving in January. I think they're going to have to sell guys off, regardless of what Mike Ashley is sort of bringing to the table.
This is off the bordering on Rangers talk.
I'm talking links into Hibs, and I think they're going to get worse. And
we might have to compete for Cloud's signing, I think. Get a wee bid in.
It would be great to both put rivalling £15,000 bids. Brilliant. And did we mention that it's over a period of 48 months? Oh, sorry. We should have mentioned that straight off.
All the nonsense they used to pull on us.
Aye.
But no, I think they're going to get worse, and I think it's going to play into Hibs' hands. Hopefully. Hopefully we've had our nonsense spell at the start of the season, finding something that works. We've lost our main striker and still kept moving on, improving. So genuinely, I think we can go into New Year hopefully a further 3-point advantage on Rangers from where we are at the moment, 3 points closer, because I do believe we'll beat them on the 27th. There's a lot to look forward to in the new year, with regards to us focusing solely on catching Rangers first. I just don't see them improving, and I think there's going to be a kind of implosion of sorts at the club, with guys disappearing. I'd be surprised if Boyd and Miller both see out the season. That's my gut feeling. I think one or both may move on in January. For what they're getting paid, they're bringing so little to the table. I hope it all happens, quite frankly.
Good. Well, it shows that the weekend was a positive result for Hibs, as we predicted it to be as well. So right, let's at this point we're accepting that this show's going to go long, extremely long, so let's throw ourselves in it. Let's get back to the football. Mikey touched on it there, and a lot of people are saying it about every team goes through the bad spell in a season. Hearts won't go unbeaten because there is this bad spell to come. Playing devil's advocate in that, is there potential that we're actually in the bad spell and we're just good enough that we can still win games?
I think we're in a bad spell. The way we've been playing the past couple of games is night and day compared to how we started the season, and considering players are coming into their fitness now, and then the bad kind of spell happened, but then we got injuries at that kind of same period of time, and then we started changing the shape of the team in preparations for certain games, and then obviously going away to Easter Road is always going to be a game for us. So I think this spell definitely is the scrappy spell when we have to get a result here and there by the odd goal, and it's been proven so far. I don't see the players that are put on the pitch performing any worse. I just can't see it, because I think they've all been together long enough now. They all know the certain formations that Robbie Nosa will put out there. They all know that there could be a different player playing next to him game after game, and there is a slight rotation in the team, and I think that there will be another maybe purple patch that will start picking up more points, and maybe another spell during January, February time. Every team goes through it, and I think Rangers will go through it as well. Hibs will go through it again, but hopefully it's out our system for the meantime, and we can pick up more points and build on a bigger gap to hopefully when we go through our next bad patch, if there is a shrinkage of the gap, to still have that cushion there.
I like the phrase shrinkage of the gap.
Well, I had another term of I think that a few players have been Rangersed up by Alan McCoist.
Scott, a lot of the time fans like to talk of players being injured or suspended. Probably more managers talk about this than supporters. They talk about it gives other players an opportunity to step up. Are we seeing that in the Hearts team for the first time, probably potentially in our lifetime, that there is actually a squad there that if someone goes out, for instance Danny Wilson, someone like Brad Mackay comes in and proves that I am actually good enough to do this job, at least, if not to the very same level, at least to a good enough level to get the job done?
I think if you're talking about Danny Wilson as an example, he's actually probably not played that many more first team football games in his career as what Brad Mackay or Rostock have. You know, I can appreciate, you know, he's had a big money move and that, and he's been down at Liverpool and trained there for a couple of years, but in terms of first team exposure, he's not had that much more than the other two centre halves, or even McGee, really. So I think he is a miss because he is part of that spine. But given the forwards we were up against, there was never going to be any question marks about Mackay. Mackay can deal with guys like Daly in his sleep. The problem with Mackay is when you've got more mobile forwards. I still think, like, if he decided to play Mackay against Guidetti and Stokes, I think you would see a different Brad Mackay, unfortunately, and I think there still is parts of his game that he needs to improve, but he's going to have to play these games to do that. In terms of midfield, Gallardo, I mean, he has played in La Liga for a few years, so there's never going to be an issue bringing him in. And obviously, you know, Walker's came in recent weeks, and I did say at the start of the season I thought he was going to be a bit part player, but as he showed in the second half, his fitness has came on leaps and bounds this year, and he's finishing games really strongly.
The penalty was a big leap forward for Walker as well, I think, because we like having Jamie Walker in the team sometimes, especially at Easter Road, because he carries himself with a certain swagger that is quite funny at times, but he struggled to justify it in big moments. And I thought when he stepped up and he took that penalty and he batted Black away when he tried to get in the mind games and that kind of thing, Walker became a man to a certain extent. He justified the swagger and he kind of said, I've got someone to bring here beyond just being a typical winger who'll float in and out, that he actually showed he's got some character. While we're talking about characters, Miguel Gallardo seems different in the midfield, but as Scott said, showed at times the touch of class that he has from La Liga. What did you think of his performance, Ross?
He was really good, absolutely solid, and it didn't seem to matter where he was in that midfield area. Very, very comfortable, not scared to pick up a booking when they're on the break as well. I think we need those players that will sacrifice a booking when I think the game's going to go a certain way. Really good. Again, his technique is something we're kind of going to get used to, I can't really fault him, really. I wish I had more to say in terms of, I should have done this better, but no, absolutely solid.
I agree. I think he was different class, especially there was a few times he was in really tight positions and he just managed to kind of juggle the ball. He seemed to have a knack of, when you see really great players, Suarez is the best example, and he goes to take on a man and it'll hit the man twice, but eventually it lands at Suarez's feet and he's one-on-one with the keeper, and you think it's amazing how he gets that lucky every single time. And I thought Gallardo had a couple like that where he thought, this is really dodgy if you lose the ball here, and it looked like he had, and then he walked away 3 seconds later with the ball having gone past 2 men. It was pretty impressive. On the midfield, Jason Holt, massive impact. Prince Buabin, we've spoken about before, when he's missing you really feel the absence. Did you feel in the game in general that Holt effectively filled his shoes, or does the goal slightly cloud our judgment on how well Holt played in the game throughout?
I think the goal possibly does cloud it a little bit. It's funny how our first show was actually the last time he featured from the start for Hearts, and we did talk a lot about his lack of penetration running forward, so it was great to see him score, because he's so capable of that sort of strike any week against any team, but unfortunately his Hearts career seems to have been just sort of a bit stop-start, different managers, the odd niggly injury. Saturday, I think first half it was hard for any of our forward players to get involved in the game much, so you've got to give him, you've got to cut him some slack for that, and he did take the goal well, but I still think Buabin would still start for me most weeks.
I thought it was interesting to see that Robbie Neilson said that he thought Jason Holt was the best person at the club to finish a chance like that, which was praise indeed, I thought, because we've actually got a few guys that, James Keatings, you would certainly fancy with those types of strikes, maybe Sam Nicholson, guys like that. So it shows that Neilson really does hold Holt in a high regard, but there seems to be this weird situation with his future. Ross, do you think that's really affecting how often, like Scott says, we hadn't seen him for a prolonged period of time there? Do you think it's all down to that as to why he's been such a bit part player, or is it just that the guys in front of him are doing so well?
I think it's just a timing issue, to be honest. I'd keep hold of him. I think we really need to keep hold of this guy. I think he's going to be a fantastic player as he grows into his role. Yes, he will be a bit part player this season, and if you were Jason Holt, you'd want to be first team. And you'd want to, go to a team that's going to put you straight in the park. But you've got to look at in the field. We've got a guy that's La Liga. We've got two guys that have proven that they are absolutely solid together. And when they're both in the same team, we're just a different kind of animal. But Holt, I really feel sorry for him, to be honest. He's a really good football player. I've been waxing lyrical about it for years since I first saw him, but it doesn't change my opinion of him. He's not going to play as much of a role as we think he will, but we need to keep him. Absolutely need to keep him, and I hope we do.
It'll be interesting to see whether the choice is ours on whether he stays, to be completely honest.
That's kind of how we have to.
It sounds like maybe he is not. For now, we'll concentrate on the last couple of players in the Hearts team that I think, or things that happened at the weekend that require a wee bit of focus. James Keatings came on and we scored a minute later. Some people will use that as a stick to beat Sofiane El Hasnaoui with, because they've decided that they would like to do that on a regular basis. But Keatings does give us something different, and he does carry a real threat with him. Do we think that he can play that role? Is that why he's not in there at the moment? Because we lack a wee bit of faith in his ability to play as a lone striker up front?
I think some people mentioned that Hart's bit of luck came from the red card. I actually think it was El Hasnaoui being injured. Now, that's nothing against him, but he had taken a couple of sore knocks in the first half and he wasn't playing very well. And what happened is that gave Robbie the opportunity to bring on Keatings, which actually stretched the Rangers' defence. You could see McCulloch and that were getting more worried by him, and it did kind of lead to the goal, because he was in behind McCulloch, which forced McCulloch to panic. And to be fair to McCulloch, he was a bit unlucky with the ricochet, but that actually did fall in our favour, that injury happening to El Hasnaoui, and that probably was the bit of luck that we got out of the game. As for El Hasnaoui, playing up front on his own, I've said this the last few weeks, I think there is a player there, but he needs to be playing off of someone in that number 10 position, facing the goal rather than with his back to goal. He can't play as a lone front man, and nothing about Saturday's first half made me think otherwise.
Okay, final thing we'll touch on the weekend's game before we move on to preview the games for this weekend, which somewhat of an afterthought really after a big league weekend, but it's Scottish Cup kicking off. We should all be excited for it, so we'll try and get some sort of level of excitement for it. But the final thing on Saturday was Robbie Neilson's change to manage the last 10 minutes when we saw that Chris Boyd had been brought on and Nicky Clark came on as well, and they were going to really roll the dice to see what they could come up with. We brought on Jordan McGee and went to 3/5 at the back, whichever way you want to look at it, which would be seen by a lot of people as a really negative change, especially when you're up against 10 men. To bring on an extra centre half, it seems like a kind of 80s, get as many big guys on to head the ball away as possible. In actual fact, it didn't really work like that, and it actually saw us dominate the ball more in that last period of the game than we probably had up to then. What did you think of it as a change at the time, and in hindsight, why was it effective? Was it effective, or was it just that Rangers were running out of steam anyway?
I think it's a fair change. I mean, at the end of the day, everyone knows Rangers' one tactic just now, and it's bypassing the midfield. So get as many men as you can back, and still have guys like Walker and Keatings and King up there, so that if you do break away, you break away at pace, and that's how we won the penalty. So, I mean, it'd be hard to say anything sort of negative about the change. It seemed to be the right change, and I can totally understand why he made it.
Yeah, I can see them. He just thought that they could cope, really, having the three at the back. They had two up front. I didn't see any problems with them both on the park. In fact, when they brought Boyd on, I was kind of sitting there thinking that Nicholson was going to come on because he would have exploited the space at that time, late on in the game. I think if you brought him on, he would have been running ragged, and they would have seen even less of the ball up front. So I didn't see it coming, but when it happened, absolutely changed the game again. So brilliant.
Good. It's nice to be so positive about everything. The one thing I was negative about, actually, with Kevin McCarthy's injury, at the time it didn't really strike me that, he might be out for 6 weeks, or it's a bit of a negative. It deprived us of that substitution, because I had hung my hat at half time on Nicholson will come on and absolutely change this game. He'll win it for us. And then McCarthy gets injured and Nicholson doesn't even come on, and we win the game anyway. And I look a wee bit stupid, to be honest. I mean, I've kind of staked what little reputation I have on Nicholson winning the game, and when he doesn't even get on, it's somewhat of a disappointment. Like, right, let's wrap up and preview the weekend's games. Mikey, Hibs have got a rather tricky away tie at Alloa. Will the momentum from the weekend take you through a comfortable victory there as well?
I believe so. We're still obviously playing better away from home. We seem to be now finding a way to break down sides that are perhaps not coming out and playing in quite an expansive manner. Weekend there proved that Dumbarton, as Ian Murray threw a tantrum about parking the bus, didn't exactly come at us until they had to. If Alloa choose to set up the same way, I think we've now got a system and a set-up and a slightly more ruthless kind of nature in front of goal at the moment, where we don't have to create quite so many chances to actually get a couple of goals on board. I do think we'll win. I think we'll win 3-0.
That is confidence. And do you know, are Hibs training on Alloa's pitch this week?
I don't actually know.
We need to find out. We need to see if Robbie started a trend.
What is it, Petrie pays?
Perhaps. I think it probably depends on the type of 3G surface that exists at
a pure
East
one.
Mains.
No, at East Mains it's probably too good to replicate.
I'm not entirely sure. Like I say, our facilities are a bit newer, so it might have the more up to date.
Should go to the Portobello pits and probably get more experience.
Even they've replaced that old sand stuff, I think. So I'm not sure if it is that. I'm not sure if it is Alloa's level.
I think if the opportunity is there and Stubbs thought it would benefit them, I'm sure he'd take it and not want to be upstaged by his fellow newbie manager. So
these forward-thinking young managers that we
outdone by his pal across the road. So depending on what kind of surface it is, I think we've been already this season anyway. So it's not going to come as a great shock either. But I'm pretty sure we played brutally badly at that point.
I think you lost 2-1, didn't you?
But that was the bad days. The bad days are gone.
That was the day you lost El Alagui, actually. I think I'm correct in saying, on the dodgy surface there.
Yeah, I was on holiday and it was quite a desperate afternoon watching Jeff and the boys on Soccer Saturday. I'm through going, this is not possible. We have hit a new low.
I think he landed badly on the dodgy surface, and that was it. That was him out for 4 months. So, right, Jambos, are we confident that Hibs' name will be in the pot for the next round?
Yeah, I think it's the sort of game where it might take them an hour to sort of break Alloa down, but I think it'll probably be a 2-0 game for Hibs. I can see them easing through fairly easy. Ross, do you share the guys' confidence?
I don't think it'll be as easy, but I think they'll get the victory. Absolutely. The pitch does play a part. They've kind of had that patch before. Yes, they got beaten. They were going for a bad patch, but I see them get the victory, maybe 2-1.
Good. So it's unanimous. Hibs have gone through. Let's hope that carries on, because it would be nice if both teams could meet further down the line. That will rest likely on Hearts' performance on Sunday against Celtic. Scott, do you have any confidence?
It just depends. I don't know what he does with the team. I mean, me personally, I was speaking about this with one or two of the guys on the bus coming over, and we were talking about, would you change the team now? Me personally, no. I'd keep Wilson and So and Ice for the league games. I'd possibly maybe bring Nicholson in and rest King for a week or two. I'd obviously El Hashnui probably drop him, maybe give Keatons a start. But I mean, really, it's a bit like the League Cup match at Parkhead. As long as we don't get embarrassed, as long as you see some positives from some players, you see some players grow against better opposition, then I hate seeing us lose against Celtic, obviously, but it's really not a priority this year.
I think you made a good point in terms of the areas of the squad that maybe require rotation, or at least could be rotated. I think what we've seen so far with the wingers in particular is that we will go with a form pair. Unless there's a specific attribute that one of them holds that the others don't, that you want to implement. And I think what we saw in really clear terms on Saturday is that Billy King is not in form anymore. His first touch at points, without being too critical, was abysmal, and he's better on the front foot running at defenders because of the way Rangers played at the back. He was required to play with his back to goal a wee bit more, and his touch just let him down too often. He ended up losing possession or taking the wrong option because he was just backed into a corner. I think we really need to see Nicholson come back in, because his form definitely had dipped, but he's good enough. We know he's good enough. It's just whether he can recapture it again. I think he needs the opportunity now, and maybe a big game like Celtic is the perfect opportunity for him. Ross, what would you do? Would you rotate at all?
I would rotate, yeah. I think after a big game like that, and after the kicking that we took, I think that a couple of the players need to come out. Eckersley, I know he's coming in because of the injury. I would then probably take out Mackay, I think, and bring McGee in, just for the simple reason that I think this will be more of a football match rather than them just trying to lump balls into the box. I think I'm glad that Patterson's back for this game. I'd bring in Nicholson as well. I think he's had his time out on the bench. I think Robbie Nielsen is identified when certain players are needing that rest and when they need to come back in. Hopefully this is the point where Nicholson comes in and does the damage. In terms of the Walker, I'd keep him in. I'm very surprised that I say that, but I'd keep him in, and up front, depending on the fitness, again, it's just I'm not really sure who's going to be.
So would you risk, for want of a better words, any of the players who have been carrying knocks?
That's one of those things I know I'm going to say yes, but as soon as I say yes and one of the guys get injured, then it'll be
You're
my
not
fault.
picking the team.
No, but I like to think that I jinx these things. As anyone else, I know it's human nature. You think you jinx stuff, but if you're going to put me on the spot, I'd say I'd risk the players that got slight knocks. I'd put them in, because I think that Celtic in the last game, the score only flattered them, and I think at Tynecastle we can do a bit more damage and make a game of it. I just think we will. Debatable on the result. Again, you'll probably ask us what we think the result's going to be, but I would risk some of the players, not all of them.
I think what gives Hearts a wee bit of a chance is off the fact that Celtic are playing on Thursday, and I think if they win that, they give themselves a pretty comfortable position to get through.
I think they might actually go through if they win.
They guarantee one of the top two places, so that might play in Hearts' favour depending on how much Celtic put into this game. I think they're playing Salzburg, possibly gives them a wee upper hand. Bear in mind that over a week since she's played Rangers, and I think that any kind of impact of the effort that's put into that game would hopefully be gone, bar McHattie.
Another thing that might work in Hearts' favour is the fact that Gomez is suspended the week after, which means that if you're looking at rotating a squad,
that means he can just kick Scott Brown as much as he wants in this game. Is that
but he doesn't have to come into your thinking, which means that he's the metronome of the Hearts team. He's the one that keeps it ticking over and really dictates the style of play, and we know that even if you're bringing rotation in, he'll still be there, so there's an element of consistency that will be preserved even if we do change it up. Right, we'll wrap up now then. Scores on the doors. Ross,
I'll go to a replay 2-2.
That's what I was going to say.
You look particularly anxious about this one. You're kind of shaking in your seat and everything there. Right, 2-2. Scott, you're going with the same.
I have to admit that's what I was thinking as well. Trying to keep this positive run going, but I mean, honestly, if I walk out there and we've played well and maybe been beaten 2-1, then I'm not going to be overly bothered.
Without being negative, do we want a replay?
Well, it's one of those things. It's not a case of wanting the replay.
There is almost the scenario where a 2-1 defeat is better than a 2-2 draw.
I mean, taking a 2-2 draw just to go there and get beat 2 or 3-0 again, obviously not. I'd rather just get beat 2-1 on the Sunday. But again, it's all about experience for some of the other guys. I mean, for guys like Mackay and that, they need these games now, because against Cowdenbeath and Livingston in coming weeks, I might be jinxing it, but they're not going to get much of a challenge. So, for these guys' development, when they're playing in a league below for a full season, it's vital that they get as many opportunities as this as you can give them.
We also could do with a wee positive experience of playing Celtic as well after, as we've said, the
It's been a bad
post-traumatic
run.
stress disorder of last season's Scottish Cup tie.
Probably do a few quid as well.
Well,
For a wee replay, that wouldn't
I don't think you would get a much of
that's
apart
the
from being
problem.
on the TV.
We went there in the
yeah.
League Cup midweek and it was 15,000 folk there, so for that it's not really much a payday. So we'll see.
There's enough of a gap in the league where I don't think a cup replay is going to sort of cause a giant backlog of matches.
See, you can say that as a Hibby because you're on the outside, but if we said that, it would sound like bravado, and it would come back to haunt us as and when the gap starts to slip.
As if we heard that a couple of times this season.
But if we
coax it out,
if we were to say, well, just as well, we're so far ahead. Right.
See, you're talking playing devil's advocate. That was me trying to put a wee fishing line out there. anyone grabbed on there.
No, we've all still got a guard up, but give us another 4 or 5 games. If it's still 9 points or maybe even more, then you'll start to see it big time. It will come out in spades, I'm sure. But right, thank you very much for joining me, guys. It seems like an age ago that we had them on the phone, but thank you very much to Scott Wilson and to Barry Anderson for joining us. We will be back again next week, where hopefully we will have some wins to talk about again. It would be nice. Hopefully straightforward wins with no injuries and no real kind of trauma to look back on like we had this weekend. We could do without any injuries, especially Adam Eckersley. You touched on it there. We've now gone for a really strong squad to 1 left back. Hibs as well. Hopefully they can carry on the goals, and we'll see. Another 6 would be
An
fun.
absolute delight, to be honest.
And the thing is, I think with the Scottish Cup it's guaranteed to at least be shown on the BBC. You might only get 30 seconds, but
They'll be behind a pillar.
If we win 4-0, they'll show like one of the goals possibly, but no, but we'll
and they'll get the player's name wrong.
No commentary, just
There you go. Right, on that note, we will leave you. Thank you very much for joining. Hit us up on facebook.com/Monday Night Football, Twitter @MNFootball. The show will be on iTunes from hopefully tomorrow night, and stay in touch with us, guys. Thank you very much for joining us. We will leave you to a couple of adverts and a night of music on Radio Saltire. Cheers, guys.
see it.
Cheers.